Welcome back to another episode of The Lost Codex, a channel dedicated to the people, places, and histories of Azeroth's universe. In the previous chapter, we covered Odin's decision to turn Helya into the first Valkyr against her will, the secret affair between Loken and Sif, which ultimately led to her death, and the gradual manipulation of Loken at the hands of Yogg-Saron. The time had come for the corrupted Keeper to dispose of his brethren and destroy all evidence of his betrayal. Today we continue with the next chapter, The Fall of the Keepers. Before Loken could turn his attention to his fellow Keepers within Ulduar's vicinity, he first had to eliminate the Prime Designate and his immortal army as a potential threat. Loken knew that Odin and his Valajar would interfere if he struck out against the other Keepers, and attacking the Halls of Valor directly would be impossible and result in a quick and effortless victory for Odin. Instead, Loken looked to Odin's adopted daughter, Helya, for a solution. For millennia, Helya and her Valkyr carried out the duties assigned to them by the Prime Designate. The spirits of dead Vrykul were lifted from their corpses and carried up to the golden gates of Odin's citadel, where they were given new, storm-forged bodies to fight in Odin's legendary Valajar. While Helya was compelled to obey the figure that had forcefully warped and changed her physical form, deep down she harbored a cold and sharp hatred for the Prime Designate, waiting for the day she could exact vengeance for the crimes committed against her and the other Valkyr. Loken reached out to Helya and proposed an alliance between them. Using her anger and hatred as fuel, Loken offered to shatter the unyielding chains that bound her to Odin's service, freeing her mind from his commands. In exchange for her freedom, Helya would seal off the realm of the Halls of Valor forever, preventing all of its inhabitants from leaving, before usurping Odin's rule as the guardian of Vrykul's spirits. Helya's desire for vengeance gave Loken all he needed to sway her in his favor, prompting Helya to gladly accept. Loken shattered the hold Odin had on Helya's mind and restored her free will. In turn, Helya called upon the arcane powers she had used to create the elemental plane many ages ago, and bent them to her will once again. The chaotic arcane energies that churned around Azeroth were bent and warped by her furious will, before surrounding the Halls of Valor and sealing off its boundaries. By the time Odin and his Valajar realized what was happening, it was too late. The Prime Designate and his warriors threw themselves against the enchanted barrier surrounding the halls. Despite all of his fury, Odin could not break the barrier. The Prime Designate and his countless Stormforged warriors were sealed within the Golden Halls of Valor, where they would be trapped for countless ages to come. With her mind now free and Odin locked away, Helya immediately set out and secured herself a new domain. Helya used her magic to create a new enchanted realm far below the skylocked halls of Valor, and bounded to the great seas of Azeroth. The realm would be known as Helheim, and soon, it would serve as a resting place for many Vrykul's souls. As she worked her magic and forged a new home for her and the other Valkyr, the hatred that had grown inside of her warped and twisted the realm into a cold place of nightmare. Dark mists crept in and surrounded her land, permeating the very heart of Helheim. Just as Odin had transformed the souls of the dead, so too did Helya. These warped Vrykul souls were given new bodies that were bound to the same ocean mists that lurked within Helheim. They would become known as Kvaldir, and were bound to the vengeful will of Helya, whose malice and rage drove them to plunder and ravage the seas of Azeroth. With Odin and his Valajar eliminated as a threat, Loken returned his attention back to Ulduar to carry out the rest of his plans. When he arrived, Loken learned that Mimiron, one of his fellow Keepers, had been investigating the Forge of Wills and the strange anomaly that permeated Loken's recently crafted soldiers. Mimiron was the most intelligent and clever of all the Keepers, and Loken knew it was only a matter of time before he discovered the truth. Before Mimiron could come to any conclusions, Loken tampered and sabotaged the Keeper's workshop, killing the brilliant engineer in what seemed like a devastating mishap. Miraculously, Mimiron was not completely destroyed. It was Mimiron's servants, the ingenious mechanomes, that discovered the dwindling spirit of the fallen keeper. Scrambling to save him, the mechanomes built Mimiron a massive mechanome body to house the keeper's soul and mind. Although the mechanomes had ultimately saved Mimiron, the brilliant keeper was not the same. Loken's meddling had damaged the keeper's mind. Disoriented and confused, Mimiron retreated into the depths of Ulduar, into his vast workshop, where he would seclude himself for many years to come. Mimiron's death would not go unnoticed, prompting Loken to summon his recently forged armies and send them off to deal with the remaining keepers. Loken's first target was the Temple of Life, home to Keeper Freya and the many creatures that had followed in her wake during the seeding of life many ages past. While their minions clashed amongst themselves, Loken and Freya exchanged blows. Freya's control over the natural energies of the world allowed her to temporarily stand toe-to-toe with the empowered Loken, before ultimately losing her stance in the battle. With her minions slain and the life energies of her temple depleted, Freya collapsed, defeated at the hands of Loken and his new dark powers. With Freya defeated, Loken turned his attention to Hodir's domain, the Temple of Winter. During his fight with Freya, Loken's Titanforge had laid siege to the Keeper of Winter and his icy minions. Hodir called upon the devastating energies of frost and snow, pummeling his attackers with the fury of 1,000 ice storms. The fire giants Ignis and Vulcan created a monstrous inferno that enveloped the frozen lair of the Keeper and decimated his frost-covered followers. Despite this, Hodir continued his battle against the fire giants before Loken himself arrived and subdued the weakened Keeper. Yogg-Saron did not sit idle as Freya and Hodir fell, and set upon their vulnerable and weakened minds with his maddening grip. Under the old god's influence, Freya would retreat into the vast halls of Ulduar, where she would spend thousands of years tending to an enormous garden and vast oasis. The weakened Hodir was forced into the halls of Winter, a frigid, icy corner of Ulduar, where he would dwell in seclusion for millennia. 4 of his 7 brethren had been eliminated as threats, and Loken knew he was close to victory. With High Keeper Ra dwelling in the far southern reaches of the world, Keeper Tyr and Keeper Arcadus were all that remained of Loken's Ulduar-bound kin. Desperation and paranoia tightened their grip on the fallen Keeper, and Loken knew that the time to cover up his crimes and destroy all evidence was running out. Should Tyr or Arcadus escape with news of his betrayal, everything he had done, all the crimes he had committed against the Titanforged, would come crashing down from the heavens with the fury of the Pantheon. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Lost Codex. We'd like to take this opportunity to give a special shout out to the amazingly talented Hypnos. Without him and his customized models, many of our depictions of these stories and characters would be left lacking with outdated models, as well as lore inaccuracies. His work can be found on his DeviantArt page, where he posts customized models of many well-known characters and lore, as well as his own interpretation of characters never depicted by Blizzard. We'd like to take this moment to direct you to our other social media pages. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and now Patreon, where we offer previews of our slides for upcoming videos, a voting system for upcoming chapter and holocore episodes, as well as a couple of new rewards coming in the near future. We'd also like to announce that we've recently been invited to the Twitch affiliate program. You can find our Twitch stream at twitch.tv/lostcodexlore. Tune into any one of our streams for some lore conversation, casual gameplay, and a look into the script writing process for these episodes. If you enjoyed today's episode on the Titan Keepers, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you missed part 1 of Odin and Helia's story, click on the video on the left. If you missed part 2 with Loken's initial corruption, click on the video on the right. Stay tuned for another episode of The Lost Codex.